Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. I'm recording this episode in March 2020, and as I speak, we are in the thick of the coronavirus crisis. COVID-19 is well and truly upon us, and in this episode, I want to talk to you about how to navigate this crisis, how to take yourself through the crisis and out the other side so that you come through unscathed, you survive, and you set yourself up to thrive post-COVID-19. So there's a few things I just want to share before we do get into the meat and potatoes. Really, when it comes to the response of how people are going to go through this crisis, there's really one of three things that's going to occur. There are going to be those people that do nothing, they bury their head in the sand, and quite frankly, in the next 18 or 24 months when we've still got things to work through with this drama, these practices may or may not survive, and if they do, they'll be significantly weakened. The second group of people will muddle through, and essentially they'll end up in a few years' time basically where they are now. And of course, we all know that it's not the same location because they've lost opportunity, they've lost momentum, they've lost impetus. And those sorts of people will be doing something. But the third group of people are the group of people that are willing to do some smart things now and get themselves on the right path to success. And we know that for the next 18 months or so, according to the infectious disease people, that we're going to see the effects of this still rippling through society. So even if you're on the right path for the next 18, 24 months, it might be fairly quiet going, but we know that once that crisis does pass fully, then you're going to be well positioned to really grow quickly into the future. And so in this episode, really it's about doing the smart things now to position yourself for later. Now, before we do get into the nuts and bolts of all those things as well, I want to tell you that I've been a dentist now for 25 or so years, and crises come relatively regularly. In my practicing life, I graduated when we had a recession. We had the Asian financial crisis, the dot-com bubble and burst. We've had the September 11th attacks in New York, of course. We've had the global financial crisis, and now, of course, the coronavirus. The reason I bring this up is not at all to diminish what's happening with the coronavirus. It is, of course, a significant major health occurrence for all of us, and the economic impact is going to be significant as well. The point I'm trying to make is the lessons that we take out of this situation will hold us instead for future crises, because there will always be things that come along to disrupt us, and we need to make sure that we take the lessons from this and learn from it as we go forward. I was talking to a client the other day, and this particular client is normally very level-headed, normally very considered, and I think even the most considered person would be having a few moments of anxiety. And so I think it's reasonable to say that if you are feeling anxious at the moment, that's normal. Everyone is feeling a little bit of anxiety around this particular situation because there's so much uncertainty. There's so much that's unknown. And even in my own life, we certainly start to wonder what's going to happen and how it's going to impact us and all the rest of it. But I want to encourage you to really focus on the things that you can do something about. So what can I do? In amongst all the uncertainty and in amongst all the challenges, I'd really like us to kind of adopt a mindset of understanding that there is still a lot of control that we do have. There's a lot of proactive steps that we can take. And of course, we want to be thinking about that in a really calm and decisive manner. Rather than feeling stressed, rather than feeling anxious, rather than running around like a chook without a head, we want to be calm, we want to be considered, and of course, we want to be decisive. And my personal thought is this is an absolute opportunity for each of us to demonstrate high personal leadership and, of course, to lead our teams, to lead our patients, and to make sure that our patients are well cared for, our team are well cared for, we're well cared for, and, of course, the business is as well. So I've really wanted to start today's conversation by talking about how to prevent the transmission or how to assist in the containment of the coronavirus. And many of you will be familiar with these things, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but all the things you've heard about already: social distancing, making sure that we're 1.5 to 1.8 meters apart from other people. That might mean rearranging your waiting room chairs. It might mean having fewer people in your waiting room. It might mean having people wait in their cars and texting them for their appointments so they can come in and not have to wait in the waiting room. It might mean, from a hand hygiene point of view, that we've got to sing happy birthday to ourselves 2 times to ensure we're washing our hands for 20 seconds or so. We need to make sure that we're sneezing into our arm or the crook of our elbow and not spreading those droplets, which is responsible for the spread of the virus itself. And we need to understand the concept of fomites, which are inanimate objects, and it could be things such as door handles, could be mobile phones, it could be keypads on FPOS machines, and all those things can be contaminated. So we need to try and limit the interaction with those surfaces, so leaving doors open, for instance, so we don't need to turn door handles, and maybe putting protective barriers over FPOS machine keys, and so on and so forth. All of those things are designed to help prevent the transmission of the disease and to try and make sure we can contain it as best we can. And it's important that, even though I'm going to be talking more broadly about how to manage the coronavirus, that we still focus very heavily on this prevention stage and the containment stage. And my friends who are medical GPs tell me that if we can flatten the curve of the coronavirus, it's going to give our health services the opportunity to respond in a timely manner without being overwhelmed and without stretching those resources to breaking point. So let's get into it. The first thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is risk. And all of this is a great big exercise in risk management. And risk management is key to business at any stage. But at particular moments such as this, the process really must be, what don't I see? What are the things that could disrupt my future stream of earnings? What are the things that could knock me out of the game? And how do I build a mitigation strategy around that? And so we need to be thinking about, whenever we look at any situation, what's the upside of it? What's the downside of it? Can I live with the downside, and can I mitigate the downside? And so when you're looking to build out your risk mitigation strategies, you want to be looking at ways you can increase your degree of control over the situation. You can reduce the likelihood of this adverse outcome occurring, which comes back to the preventive things we spoke about. And of course, we can reduce the cost or the impact of it should it occur. So the things that we're going to be talking about today really come back to careful examination of risk. And we've got to understand that we've got to play probability versus possibility, mostly. And so we're going to be talking about the probabilities largely today. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is cash flow. Cash flow is clearly an important element of any business. Cash flow is the oxygen that keeps businesses alive. And without it, businesses go out of business very, very quickly indeed. So we've got to be really, really conscious of preserving our cash flow. And, as much as possible, I'm encouraging you to keep your powder dry, as they say. And what that means, on a practical sense, is you need to make sure you're getting your money in from your patients as quickly as possible. And where feasible and where reasonable, trying to hang on to that money for as long as possible. So that may mean that if you're having some issues around cash flow, you might need to negotiate with people such as banks with loans and so on. You might need to look at reducing interest rates. You might need to look at changing the terms. You may need to go on a payment holiday for a little while, so on and so forth. But definitely you want to be in close contact with your bank and finance institutions as needed. But you might also need to have a conversation with the Australian Tax Office or the tax authority in your country. And you may even need to be talking with your landlord about how you can manage the rent over this period of time as well. So it's really important as well to make sure that you defer purchases of non-essential equipment, and not saying that you shouldn't buy things, but you just need the things you need to keep open and to keep going. Now is probably not the time to buy the new mills for CEREC or perhaps even other bits and pieces of kit such as that. And of course, the biggest threat to cash flow is closure. And so this is why we've got to really take the health of ourselves and our team very, very seriously. And all those things that we spoke about earlier are going to be key because, as I said, what kills cash flow very quickly is the need to close. So the second consideration really I'd like to talk about is team. And we've got to be able to communicate with our team really, really well. We have a responsibility to our team for their well-being, for their safety. And so we need to be able to communicate very effectively, very clearly, and very calmly to the team about what's going on, what are the risks, what's the likelihood of things happening, and how we're going to mitigate the risk of them becoming ill. And so that means that we're going to need to be open, we're going to need to be honest around that. From the perspective of the potential of laying people off for short periods of time or even longer periods of time, hopefully it doesn't come to that. Of course, if you stay open and can maintain normal business operations, then hopefully there's no impact at all. But if you are impacted in that way, I'd suggest that it's really important to work with your team, and this forms part of the conversation up front and early, so that if you need to enact any of these plans, then you're not blindsiding people and it's already been anticipated. So you might want to ask people to work with you in terms of working down any leave balances. You might want to talk about reduction of hours across the board so that no one person is impacted more than others. But if you do need to have people take time away from the business for whatever reason, then you're going to need to look at what are the non-essential people. What are the people not contributing to the revenue generation of the practice? Who are the people who are least efficient in that regard as well? And perhaps start with there. I will say that your team are a huge asset, and they will be a massive asset for you when this crisis does pass. So everything that you can humanly do to maintain the integrity of your team, I think is going to be a really, really important thing for you. So of course, we need to talk about our patients as well, and we need to be able to communicate with our patients very effectively what measures we're putting in place to protect them as well. And so patients will be watching the news, patients will be seeing what's going on, and they'll be expecting you to communicate with them about what your measures are around the coronavirus and what you're going to be doing to look after their health. So I think there's lots of opportunities to communicate. Clearly, you can do that in confirmation calls. You can do that through newsletters and other sorts of paraphernalia as well, social media and the like. But what I'd be conveying to the patients of the practice is that you normally have your rigorous infection control protocols in place, of course, but in this scenario, we've taken additional precautions to preserve the safety of the patients, the team, and the people within the practice. And you could outline what those things are. So when you come into the practice, you might notice the waiting room chairs are 1.5 meters apart to facilitate social distancing. You'll notice we've taken away things such as magazines and newspapers so that droplets can't sit on those and be a source of cross-contamination, and blah, blah, blah. All those sorts of things that you might want to communicate to your patients that, yes, you already have very, very rigorous infection control protocols. You're taking this really seriously, and here's the additional measures you're taking to make sure that your place of work, the practice that you work at, is being responsible and doing all it can to be a good member of society and to minimize the risk of this disease spreading further. So beyond that, when it comes to supplies, it's really important, of course, to make sure we've got supplies of masks. We understand that that's been very, very difficult for a little while. In Australia, at least for those people overseas, maybe that's different. But in Australia, there's certainly been some concerns around shortage of masks. As I'm recording this, I heard some news over the weekend that there'd been a lift on the export ban from China. Now that will need to be confirmed by different suppliers, but I know one of the suppliers we deal with is now able to import masks into Australia. So that's really good. But beyond masks, we'll need to make sure we have the remaining protective equipment, gloves and so on, hand soap, hand sanitizer, and all those other things. So again, make sure you maintain a healthy stock of things that's reasonable and you think is sensible in the current environment. From a marketing perspective, this is going to sound like perhaps an anomalous topic to bring up here, but I think it's really important to understand that it's not business as usual. The market is probably not going to respond entirely well to overly aggressive advertising. Now, perhaps I'm wrong on that, but I think there is a place for being sensitive and being able to read the mood of society. So I'd make sure that if you are marketing, it is important to read the mood and to fit in with that mood rather than just continuing to think that whatever marketing you did last month will continue to be effective this month. So with respect to that, I'm also aware that some people are concerned that patients may choose not to proceed with dental treatment in the current environment, and that's fine. But I can also say that there is an approach that you might want to take where you talk to patients about maintaining optimal health through this period, and perhaps there's an opportunity to make sure they get some treatment completed so that they can remain really healthy throughout this period, because let's face it, no one wants to be at home in self-isolation with a toothache, and so we want to make sure that if anyone does need to isolate or is isolated, that they do so in a manner that's really comfortable and they don't have to worry about their dental health throughout that time at all. So, of course, if for whatever reason the practice closes down or you can't work or whatever happens to be, we need to make sure that there are some things that can be done. And so this is an opportunity for training. If you're a Savvy Dentist Academy member, there's a ton of resources there. I'd really encourage you to log in, have your team log in, run some training webinars if you want to, or use ours in there. We've got a heap of materials in the Academy, but whether it's ours or other things, this is an opportunity for training your team. Jump on Zoom, jump on whatever video conferencing platform you like to use, and run some training. It's also an opportunity to build out the intellectual property assets of your practice, so that the standard operating procedures, the checklist, the tools, and so on. If you're allowed into the practice, perhaps an opportunity for stock take and cleaning. And of course, if you're the business owner, this is an opportunity potentially to do all the thinking and the planning that you may not otherwise get time to do. And so it's really important that you take this time as an opportunity and start planning for when things do return to normal. And of course, finally, you can use the time to catch up on some R&R. Maybe you might bring your own holidays forward or your team members' holidays forward and take that opportunity to have a rest and to come back refreshed and recharged. And that's not a bad thing as well. Now, in the event that you do get closed down for whatever reason, I think it's important to try and have a plan B as well, so that perhaps your patients can be seen. Many years ago in Canberra, I can think of a particular dentist. He and I were great friends, and if he went on holidays, I'd see his patients, or if I went on holidays, he'd see mine. And equally, I remember that same dentist, when we were renovating a practice and we were closed down, he offered me a room to work out of. And so what I'm going to suggest is perhaps a little counterintuitive for some, but it's a thought that it might hold you in good stead. So I'm going to offer it here and hope that it helps you. And that would be to work with the other dentists in your local area and perhaps come up with some sort of agreement that if one of you is closed down and providing the remaining people are healthy and well, that potentially you might be able to borrow a surgery from a colleague so that you can at least generate some revenues, keep some of your patients being ticked over and being seen. And I think that that's just a nice collegiate way to approach that. And again, it's about dentists showing leadership in the community. And it's about looking after one another for the viability of the profession as a whole. Just a couple little points as well. I'm just going to mention that while I think it's really important to stay up to date with the latest and most relevant health information, it is possible to spend too much time worrying about things, watching the news 24/7, and creating a sense of anxiety for yourself just by overindulging in the news. So I'm going to suggest that you watch the news enough to have the relevant health information, but from there, just tune out to it a little bit, because I think overexposure to all that sort of material can lead to anxiety, can lead to clouding of judgment, and of course impeding great decision making. So beyond all this, what I'd like to say is there will be another crisis, and one of the things that we've been talking about for quite a while now, long before the coronavirus came out, was that we need to have some preparation for future crises. And over the last 9, 10, 12 months, we've been talking about making sure you build a rainy day bank account, making sure you've got a nest egg, because there will be another crisis. There will be something that comes along down the track. So let's use this time to get through this one, but also think a little bit about the next one, which will come one day, and to make sure that you're taking money out of your business, building yourself a rainy day bank account so you've got a lovely cash buffer there, so that when things do go south or when things do go pear-shaped, you're not going to be worried about money so much. You know that you've got this covered and you can take care of anything that comes your way. So there's my navigation guide for the coronavirus as it stands now. If things change, and my thoughts change on this, I will record an updated version of this. But in the meantime, I hope you find this helpful. I hope you find it practical, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you moving forward. So from all of us here at Savvy Dentist, have a great week ahead, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.